So in this video, we are going to be reading a poem by Emily Dickinson, and we are going to analyze it by annotating it for some of this stuff that I talked about in a previous video. So for this unit, you will be getting a packet of poems. And when you get your packet of poems, you're going to find that you're going to be annotating them, and I want you to annotate it in this exact way. So you might want to find yourself like highlighters and maybe different color pens if you're someone who likes to color code, and then have out your notes on analyzing poetry. It should be the American Poetry Intro Cornell Notes. So some of the pre-reading stuff you should do is really look at the title. For Emily Dickinson, she is a poet during that romantic time period, and she tends to not have real titles for her poems. In fact, a lot of her poems are really just the first line. A lot of her titles are really just the first line of her poem. So it's not particularly important, except for the fact that we're going to be looking at that first line and kind of interpret why that is important, and what it says about the theme of the poem, because she is, showing that particular line to us first and kind of hooking us in that way. So then the second thing you want to do is, of course, read through the poem once, and it is best to try to read it out loud so you can hear whether there's some sort of rhythm to it. So this is called There's a Certain Slant of Light by Emily Dickinson. There's a certain slant of light, winter afternoons, that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes. Heavenly hurt it gives us, we can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. None may teach it, any. 'Tis the sealed despair, an imperial affliction sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, 'tis like the distance on the look of death. All right, so marking up this poem and annotating it. So I'm looking at the title first. There's a certain slant of light. So when we're talking about a slant of light, already I'm kind of imagining kind of a light coming in through the window, and it's slightly slanted, kind of like where you would see a cat wanting to sit, something like that. So she also likes to, capitalize random nouns. And here it's very important that it is a specific type of light, a specific slant, a specific direction of light. So this seems pretty important. I'm going to box it for now. And then I'm going to just write down some of the thoughts that I have. Specific direction. All right, so I'm going to keep looking, and after looking at the title, the next thing I need to do is paraphrase. When you're paraphrasing, you're kind of working through your interpretation that way. And for this poem, because it's already so neatly divided, I'm going to kind of paraphrase every stanza. I've got 4 stanzas here. So as I'm reading this poem, I'm seeing that this light, we're talking about a particular light that comes in the winter. So we get a little bit of setting, and it's oppressive. So kind of like it's really, really heavy, and that comes with this word too, heavy. And it's as heavy as some of the hymns and songs that you might hear in a Catholic church, a cathedral. So I'm going to put speaker is discussing a light in the winter that is as heavy as church hymns. All right, second stanza, heavenly hurt it gives us, we can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. So it's kind of like a pain that we're getting that's a divine pain. And it's not something that you're going to see on your skin, like you're not going to see a scar, but you are going to find that something has changed from within you. This light is a divine pain that changes us from within. Stanza 1, stanza 2, stanza 3. And it's not something that you can really explain to people. It's just something that you feel, this particular pain, this light. And it kind of is emotional in the way that it is despair. It seals you up. And it is a sadness, a hopelessness. All right, and then we've got some things here that kind of shows that everything seems silent when this light comes. But when this light goes away, you almost feel like, and this is where I'm interpreting this word distance. For me, the word distance is similar to distant in the way that it might mean a far away kind of distance. However, of course, you can interpret it as being nearby. But for me, I'm going to say that when that pain comes, everything is silent, but then when it goes away, you get this relief, almost as if death is farther away and not as close as you think it is. That's my personal interpretation of this. So it is very important to do this paraphrase part, and I really warn you against, just looking up what the poem might mean, because you're really losing some of that personal connection that you would have with the poem if you work through it yourself. If I were to look this up, it might be that some other people who have interpreted this particular poem are saying different things than I am. Maybe, for example, they think that the distance is closer, and instead of it being a relief, it just means that you might be closer to death. But this is my own interpretation while I'm considering this sort of heaviness that comes from your personal thinking. All right, so we're looking at motifs, some repeating images. So, of course, a repeating image would be that light. And another image that I'm seeing is that this light is a religious one. Okay, so some of this religious imagery. All right, and it's really important, these things that are important. Imperial, that almost sounds like, kingly, kind of royal. Scanning for structural shifts is what we're doing next. And when we're looking at structural shifts, we should really be scanning the poem. But while I was reading it, I can already tell that there is a particular rhythm to it. All right. And that rhythm is important because it's, of course, bringing us back to this musical theme, right? This oppressive musical theme. And then we do see sort of this rhyme scheme here. Afternoons rhymes with tunes. So it's kind of sing-songy. All right, so these are some things that I'm noticing. I'm just going to do the rhyme scheme real quick. So it's mostly rhyming the second and fourth line in each stanza. Okay, and that doesn't change at all, so there isn't really a change there. But I do see that, there's music here, and then there's silence in the meaning of this poem. So I'm going to give myself a little note that there is some sort of something going on there that makes it a little bit quiet suddenly. All right, identify poetic devices and tone. So for that, I'm going to take a look at a lot of these similes here in this poem. All right, so seeing that the light is being compared to music, the church hymns. So I've got a simile right here. And then we also have a lot of personification where everything stops and we hear these things are given human qualities, but landscape and shadows are not human. So we have a personified death here. Death is able to look. So personification very clearly in this last stanza. All right, and then the tone overall seems, for me, to be painful. Okay, so this tone shows that the speaker is sad. All right, I'm going to put painful here for tone. And then here is when there is some sort of relief. That's what I'm going to put. All right, appreciating sounds and emphasis. We already kind of did that when we were reading the poem out loud. So we do get that sing-songy element to this poem. Connect to poetic movement. So for the poetic movement, this is a romantic period. And I know that because if I'm looking at this PowerPoint, right, Emily Dickinson is one of the romantic poets. So if we're looking at some of the elements, some of the characteristics, we definitely get a little bit of that nature and solitude from that silence in the last stanza. And we also get a little bit of that supernatural with the personified death. Overwhelming emotion, of course, with this really depression feeling. So romantic, I'm going to put emotion, appreciation of light, nature's solitude. All right, and those are some of those elements and characteristics that I'm seeing. Keeping resonant lines in your heart. So for me, really what sticks out is that first stanza and then this last one really resonated with me because that light and music connection and then that silence really carried a lot of meaning for me. I just felt it. All right, reflecting on life. Here is what we're talking about, the theme of the poem. So when we're talking about theme, we're thinking about what is the poet trying to tell us about human nature or about life, a fact of life, or an opinion that they have about life. And for me, they're obviously saying that people suffer, right? We all have this pain. It's not a pain that we can really describe, but it is something that we should acknowledge happens to everybody. And we need to be maybe more understanding that everyone is going through something and everyone feels it. So I'm going to put something like the theme of the poem is All right, so I'm got the theme of the poem is that everyone feels an internal pain and deserves empathy from others. And it's okay if when I'm looking through your poetry packet that everything's kind of like all messy and stuff like that. I really just want to see your thinking, your own connections that you have with these poems. And your poetry packet is going to be very individualized. I'm going to be choosing the poems for you. And maybe you might have similar poems with other people in the class, but there's so much poetry in the world that you might not get the exact same poem as somebody else in the class. All right, so I want to see you do this with your poetry packet and really feel some of this poetry that we are working with. All right, bye.